November 13, 1942, 0148 hours, Iron Bottom Sound, Guadalcanal. The searchlight beam from destroyer Amatsukaze pierced the tropical darkness like a sword of white fire, illuminating Captain Tamechi Hara's face in stark relief as he gripped the bridge rail with trembling hands. Around his ship, American shells exploded in perfect patterns, each burst bracketing his destroyer with mathematical precision that defied everything he understood about naval warfare. The enemy gunners were firing blind through total darkness, yet their accuracy seemed supernatural. "These Americans are shooting without seeing us," he would write in his war diary that night, "yet they hit where we will be, not where we are." In those terrifying moments, as USS Helena's radar-guided salvos walked toward Amatsukaze with relentless precision, the Imperial Japanese Navy's most treasured advantage was dying. For 40 years, since Admiral Togo's triumph at Tsushima, Japanese naval doctrine had been built on a single immutable truth: whoever owned the night owned the seas. That night, as American SG radar painted targets 15 miles beyond visual range, 20 years of Japanese night fighting supremacy began its final death spiral. The transformation would be swift and merciless. Within 18 months, American destroyers equipped with 10-centimeter radar would turn Japanese night fighters from predators into prey, achieving kill ratios of 11.8 to 1 by 1944. The mathematics of defeat were being calculated, not in ships lost or territories surrendered, but in the sudden obsolescence of Japan's most crucial tactical advantage: the ability to strike unseen in darkness. The Imperial Japanese Navy's mastery of night combat had been cultivated since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. At the Battle of Tsushima, Admiral Togo's torpedo boats had devastated the Russian fleet under cover of darkness. This victory became gospel, establishing night combat as the cornerstone of Japanese naval strategy for defeating numerically superior enemies. By 1942, this doctrine had evolved into the most sophisticated night fighting system in the world. Japanese sailors trained relentlessly in darkness. Lookouts underwent specialized programs to enhance their night vision, spending hours in darkened rooms, following strict diets rich in vitamin A, and practicing distance estimation in low-light conditions. The average Japanese lookout could spot ship silhouettes at 7,000 meters on a moonless night, twice the distance of their American counterparts. Their training was so intensive that elite lookouts could distinguish between different ship classes by silhouette alone at ranges exceeding 5,000 meters. The technology gap seemed to confirm Japanese superiority. While America relied on primitive radar sets that most captains distrusted, Japanese optics led the world. Their 25-power binoculars, manufactured by Nippon Kogaku, provided clarity that American equipment couldn't match. More importantly, Japanese ships carried the Type 93 torpedo, the most lethal naval weapon of the war. These long-lance torpedoes could reach 44,000 yards at 36 knots, carrying 1,800-pound warheads that could break a destroyer in half. When fired at night from beyond visual range, they were nearly unstoppable. Captain Raizo Tanaka, commanding Destroyer Squadron 2, had perfected the tactics that made Japanese night attacks so devastating. His ships would approach at high speed, launch coordinated torpedo spreads from multiple bearings, then withdraw before enemy gunfire could respond. At the Battle of Tasafaranga on November 30th, 1942, Tanaka's 8 destroyers would demonstrate this doctrine's power, sinking the heavy cruiser USS Northampton and crippling 3 others while losing only 1 destroyer. But unknown to Japanese naval planners, American engineers at the MIT Radiation Laboratory were perfecting technology that would render Japanese night fighting skills obsolete. The cavity magnetron, delivered by the British Tizard mission in September 1940, enabled production of microwave radar operating at 3 GHz frequency. This 10-centimeter wavelength radar could detect destroyer-sized targets at 15 nautical miles with accuracy of plus or minus 40 yards in range and half a degree in bearing. The SG surface search radar represented a quantum leap in naval technology. Unlike earlier meter wave sets that painted crude blips on oscilloscope screens, the SG radar featured a plan position indicator display that showed a god's eye view of the battle space. Operators could track multiple contacts simultaneously, distinguish between ship types by their radar signatures, and even detect torpedo wakes racing through the water. The system updated every 2 seconds as the antenna rotated, providing real-time tactical information that Japanese lookouts, no matter how skilled, could never match. Production of SG radar sets began at Western Electric, Westinghouse, and General Electric factories. By November 1942, American shipyards were installing these systems as standard equipment on Fletcher-class destroyers. The first of this class, USS Fletcher DD-445, commissioned on June 30, 1942, carried SG radar integrated with the Mark 37 gun director system. This combination transformed the 5-inch 38 caliber guns into precision weapons that could engage targets in total darkness with devastating accuracy. The Mark 37 fire control system incorporated gyroscopic stabilization, automatic radar tracking, and mechanical ballistic computation. When linked to SG radar data, it could calculate firing solutions in seconds, automatically adjusting for target speed, course, wind, and ship motion. The 5-inch guns could fire 15 to 20 rounds per minute with radar-directed accuracy that exceeded anything achievable through optical fire control. Each gun delivered 68-pound high-explosive shells with proximity fuses that detonated near their targets, maximizing damage against unarmored vessels. American industrial production dwarfed Japanese capabilities. Between 1942 and 1944, American shipyards produced exactly 175 Fletcher-class destroyers, more destroyers than Japan, built of all types during the entire war. Each ship carried radar systems more sophisticated than anything in the Japanese fleet. The magnetron tubes at the radar's heart, impossible for Japan to manufacture reliably, were mass-produced in American factories. By war's end, the United States had produced over 100,000 radar sets of all types. The night of November 12th to 13th, 1942, would begin the shattering of Japanese assumptions. The naval battle of Guadalcanal began when Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan's task force intercepted Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe's bombardment group approaching Henderson Field. While only USS Fletcher represented the new destroyer class, several ships carried SG radar, including USS Helena. At 0124 hours, USS Helena's SG radar detected Japanese ships at 27,000 yards, far beyond visual range. For the next 20 minutes, American radar operators tracked the approaching Japanese force, while Japanese lookouts strained futilely into the darkness. Helena's radar officer, Lieutenant Commander Rodman Smith, watched the green blips converge on his PPI scope with professional fascination. The Japanese formation showed perfect tactical discipline, maintaining precise intervals as they approached their bombardment positions. They had no idea American guns were already trained on them. The battle descended into chaos as American radar-directed fire disrupted Japanese formations before they could employ their superior night fighting tactics. Destroyer Akatsuki, attempting her specialized night torpedo attack, was caught in radar-directed crossfire from multiple American ships. She exploded and sank in minutes, her magazines detonating in a pillar of flame visible for miles. Commander Hara on Amatsukaze experienced this new reality firsthand. His ship successfully torpedoed USS Barton, breaking her in half, and USS Juno, leaving her crippled. But when he illuminated USS Atlanta with his searchlight to direct gunfire, American shells immediately converged on his position from multiple bearings. The enemy gunners could see his muzzle flashes and searchlight beam on their radar screens, using them as aiming points for devastatingly accurate return fire. The psychological impact transcended mere tactical defeat. Japanese naval officers who had spent years perfecting their night fighting skills watched helplessly as technology rendered their expertise worthless. Commander Yasuhide Yamada, gunnery officer aboard heavy cruiser Chokai, reported the disorienting effect of fighting an enemy that could see in darkness. "We trained for 20 years to fight at night," he wrote in his official report. "Now the Americans make night into day with their electric eyes. Our advantages have become meaninglessness." By early 1943, American radar technology was transforming night combat throughout the Solomon Islands. The Battle of Rennell Island on January 29th to 30th demonstrated American confidence in their electronic advantage. Task Force 18, led by Rear Admiral Robert Giffen, advanced boldly into Japanese-controlled waters, relying entirely on radar for situational awareness. Although Giffen's force suffered losses from Japanese air attack, their radar-guided night maneuvers showed how completely the tactical balance had shifted. The definitive demonstration came at the Battle of Vella Gulf on August 6th to 7th, 1943. Commander Frederick Moosberger's 6 destroyers intercepted 4 Japanese destroyers carrying reinforcements to Kolombangara. For the first time, American destroyers were permitted to operate independently of cruiser forces, freed to employ the radical new tactics that radar made possible. At 23:33 hours, USS Dunlap made radar contact with the Japanese force at 29,500 yards. The enemy appeared as 4 distinct blips on her SG radar screen, maintaining formation as they approached through Vela Gulf. Moosbrugger ordered his ships into two columns, with Destroyer Division 12 preparing to launch torpedoes, while Destroyer Division 15 maneuvered to cross the enemy's T. The Japanese had no idea American ships were tracking their approach. Captain Kaju Sugiura's destroyers maintained radio silence and lookout discipline, following standard doctrine for night operations in enemy waters. Their Type 22 radar sets, when they functioned at all, provided only crude range information with bearing accuracy of plus or minus 3 degrees. Most critically, Japanese radar operators had never trained to interpret PPI displays, relying instead on ASCO presentations that showed range but not bearing. At 23:41 hours, with the range closed to 6,300 yards, Moosbrugger gave the order to fire. 24 torpedoes launched in just 63 seconds, their wakes invisible in the darkness. The Americans had developed new tactics specifically for radar-equipped destroyers. Approach undetected, launch full torpedo salvos at medium range, then withdraw at high speed while the enemy remained blind. Japanese lookouts spotted the incoming torpedoes only 30 seconds before impact. Destroyer Hagikaze, Captain Sugiura's flagship, took 2 torpedo hits and exploded in a ball of flame. Arashi and Kawakaze followed within minutes, their magazines detonating as long lance torpedoes in their tubes sympathetically detonated from the American torpedo strikes. Only Shiger escaped, damaged by a dud torpedo that passed through her rudder without exploding. The battle lasted just 8 minutes. 3 Japanese destroyers sank with all hands, taking 700 crew and 820 troops to the bottom. American casualties were 0. Captain Tamechi Hara, commanding Shigur, called it one of the most astounding torpedo successes in history. But for Japanese naval officers, it represented something far more ominous: the complete obsolescence of their night fighting doctrine. The technological disparity extended beyond radar to every aspect of combat systems. American proximity-fused shells, developed by the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, revolutionized anti-aircraft and surface warfare. Instead of requiring direct hits, these shells exploded when their miniature radar detected they were near targets. Development cost $1 billion in 1940s currency, 5% of Japan's entire 1944 gross national product. Each proximity fuse contained miniaturized vacuum tubes that could withstand 20,000 times gravity acceleration when fired. By war's end, America had produced 22 million proximity fuses. Japanese observers reported these shells seemed to explode by magic, knowing when they approached aircraft or ships. Admiral Kasuke Okada, witnessing proximity-fused shells in action during a 1945 raid, reported the American shells explode by perfect timing, as if guided by invisible spirits. This is not warfare. It is supernatural mathematics. Japanese countermeasures proved inadequate. Type 22 radar, their most advanced system, operated at 150 MHz with only 2 kilowatts of peak power. Range accuracy was plus or minus 300 yards, bearing accuracy plus or minus 3 degrees. More critically, only 300 sets were produced during the entire war, with many proving unreliable due to manufacturing defects. The first 60 sets built yielded only 6 that actually functioned properly. American production overwhelmed Japanese capabilities through sheer industrial might. The MIT Radiation Laboratory, established specifically to develop radar technology, employed 4,000 engineers and scientists. By 1943, they produced approximately 1,000 SG radar sets during the war, each more sophisticated than anything in the Japanese inventory. Component manufacturing required materials Japan couldn't obtain: high-purity silicon for crystal detectors, precision-machined copper for waveguides, specialized steel alloys for magnetron construction. By late 1943, Japanese naval doctrine acknowledged American radar superiority. Combined fleet orders began emphasizing radical maneuvering and acceptance of higher casualties to achieve torpedo launch positions. These orders represented complete capitulation to American technological superiority. The Imperial Navy that had once sought night battles now actively avoided them. The Battle of Cape St. George on November 25, 1943, demonstrated the futility of Japanese resistance. Captain Arleigh Burke's Destroyer Squadron 23 intercepted 5 Japanese destroyers attempting to evacuate troops from Buka Island. Burke's ships detected the enemy force on radar at 18,000 yards and maneuvered for a perfect ambush. The engagement was fought entirely by radar plot, with Japanese lookouts never spotting American ships until torpedoes were already in the water. Burke's destroyers sank 3 Japanese ships ships and damaged another with no American losses. Most significantly, the battle was won through pure radar superiority, with American ships engaging targets they never saw visually. Commander Bernard Austin, leading Destroyer Division 46, reported his ships fired on radar contacts throughout the engagement, scoring multiple torpedo and gunfire hits on targets that remained invisible to optical observation. The Japanese submarine force, initially less affected by American radar superiority, soon encountered the technology's reach. Fleet submarines attempting to recharge batteries on the surface at night discovered that darkness no longer provided safety. SG radar could detect a surfaced submarine at ranges exceeding 50 nautical miles, far beyond visual range, even in daylight. Submarine Y-175, attempting to attack American carriers near Makin Island, was detected by destroyer radar at 13 miles and destroyed by depth charges before she could submerge. Japanese training programs struggled to adapt to the radar age. The torpedo school at Yokosuka attempted to develop blind launch techniques, firing spreads of torpedoes at calculated positions without visual contact. Success rates were minimal compared to traditional visual attacks. The Naval War College developed new night fighting doctrines based on accepting catastrophic casualties for the possibility of achieving surprise. Even these desperate measures proved inadequate against radar-equipped opponents. The final phase of the Solomon Islands campaign saw Japanese forces completely outmatched in night combat. At the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay on November 1st to 2nd, 1943, American radar guided Task Force 39 to victory against numerically superior Japanese forces. Rear Admiral Aaron Merrill's cruisers and destroyers detected enemy ships at maximum radar range, maneuvered for optimal firing positions, and engaged with devastating accuracy, while Japanese lookouts strained uselessly into the darkness. Production statistics revealed the war's mathematical inevitability. American factories produced more radar sets in 6 months than Japan manufactured in 4 years. Boeing's Seattle plant alone produced more electronic components for fire control systems than Japan's entire electronics industry. The cavity magnetron, impossible for Japanese engineers to replicate, enabled American radar development that Japan could never match. By war's end, the technological gap had become a chasm. American destroyers carried radar systems that could detect periscope depth submarines at 3 nautical miles and track torpedo wakes to their launching points. Japanese ships still relied primarily on optical spotting, even using color-dyed shell splashes to observe fall of shot. The long-lance torpedo, once invincible in night combat, became vulnerable to radar-guided evasive maneuvers that allowed American ships to dodge attacks that they could see coming on their scopes. The human cost of technological obsolescence was staggering. Of the 169 destroyers in Japanese service at the war's beginning, only 47 remained operational at surrender. Most were sunk in night actions, where American radar provided decisive advantage. The cream of Japanese destroyer officers, trained in pre-war night fighting techniques, died with their ships as technology rendered their skills worthless. Captain Hara, the only Japanese destroyer commander to survive from Pearl Harbor to surrender, witnessed this transformation with growing horror. In his post-war memoir, he described watching American ships maneuver in perfect coordination through darkness so complete that Japanese lookouts couldn't see their own formation mates. The Americans fought as if they possessed supernatural vision, he wrote. They knew where we were, where we had been, and where we would go. We were blind men fighting those who could see through night itself. The radar revolution extended far beyond the Solomon Islands. At Leyte Gulf, American destroyers coordinated attacks through smokescreens and rain squalls that rendered visual spotting impossible. At Samar, destroyer escort USS Johnston engaged Japanese heavy cruisers in conditions where optical fire control was useless, relying entirely on radar to aim her 5-inch guns at targets she never saw. The Fletcher-class destroyers became symbols of American technological supremacy. Their SG radar, integrated with advanced fire control systems, could engage multiple targets simultaneously in any weather or visibility condition. Japanese naval officers captured after the war consistently cited American radar as the decisive factor in their defeat. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, before his death on Saipan, reportedly told his staff that fighting Americans with radar was like fighting gods who could see through darkness, storm, and distance. The implications transcended naval warfare. Radar development drove innovations in electronics, materials science, and manufacturing that transformed civilian industry. The microwave technology that enabled SG radar later revolutionized communications, leading to cellular phones, satellite systems, and the internet. The precision Precision manufacturing required for magnetron tubes, advanced production techniques used in everything from automobiles to appliances. For Japan, the radar gap represented more than technological disadvantage. It symbolized the futility of traditional military virtues against industrial modernity. The samurai spirit that had carried Japanese forces to victory at Tsushima proved powerless against American engineering and mass production. Night fighting skills honed over decades became meaningless when enemies could see through darkness itself. The final irony was how quickly American radar superiority was achieved. From the first SG installation on USS Augusta in April 1942 to the decisive victories of late 1943 took only 18 months. In that brief span, America transformed from a navy that feared night combat to one that actively sought it. Japanese forces that had dominated darkness for 40 years found themselves helpless against an enemy they could neither see nor understand. As Captain Hara stood in Amatsukaze's bridge that November night in 1942, watching American shells explode around his ship with impossible accuracy, he witnessed the end of an era. The radar-guided salvos that bracketed his destroyer marked not just tactical defeat, but the obsolescence of everything Japanese naval warfare represented. Those who see first win, he would write years later. The Americans developed eyes that could pierce the night itself, and darkness, once our greatest ally, became our tomb. The mathematical precision of American radar fire had spoken the final verdict. In the electronic revolution that swept through naval warfare, Japan's night fighting supremacy became just another casualty of technological progress, swept away by the invisible waves that gave American ships the power to turn darkness into light.